Business Skills 360, the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Hello, I'm Tim Simmons, and you're listening to Business Skills 360. We're going to kick off the new year with an insanely great show on presentations. But first, I want to wish all of you an awesome 2011. Hopefully, the coming year is unbelievably wonderful for you. I know it will be for me. Now, let's get to all that awesomeness. Okay, forget everything I just said. I'm not Steve Jobs, and I don't have a shiny new gizmo to show you. If I keep using words like awesome, you're going to get sick of me really fast. You might have heard that Steve Jobs gives great presentations. Well, he can wow a crowd of people who already love Apple. But should we really try to copy him? His style and his adjectives don't really work when English is not your first language. And they fall flat when you are an HR manager presenting a new compensation plan or an engineer reporting change orders on a big project. So, exactly how can you make an impact? How can you tighten up your presentation so that it connects to your audience? I'm sure all of you have heard of the mnemonic device KISS, short for Keep It Short and Simple. This is excellent advice for all types of business communication, and I completely agree with it. But KISS misses a couple of key points that you also need to consider, so I've added these and now like to use KISSER, which stands for Keep It Short, Simple, Engaging, and Real. Let's look at the first term, short. Many bad presentations have too much repetition or unnecessary information. People want what is important and relevant, and that's what you should give them. Try this. After you prepare your presentation, go through and cut out 30%. You should be able to do that without damaging your central message. What remains will have much more impact because it's not surrounded by fluff. This applies to PowerPoint slides, charts, and diagrams as well. As a general rule, try to limit slides to 1 per minute. And if your boss gives you 10 minutes to speak, make sure you can do it in just 5. Next is simple. Simple means organized and clear. Start with the purpose of your presentation, which you should be able to summarize in 1 sentence. Something like, make people understand that expenses are too high. From that purpose, organize your ideas into 3 or 4 points. If you want, you can frame these points as questions, like this. What expenses can we reduce? What expenses can we eliminate? And what are the long-term savings? And tell your audience what the outline is at the start. If your questions are good ones, they'll want to figure out the answers. Simple also applies to your language and visuals. Don't try to impress people with technical lingo. It won't work. And keep PowerPoint slides simple. No confusing charts or graphs. Only the essential information in simple form. The text on your slides should not be too hard to see, no smaller than a 30-point font. This will force you to keep the text simple. I promise you, people will appreciate that. Okay, now we come to engaging. You need to catch and hold people's attention. You want them to be interested. And how do we do that? In terms of what you say, there are a lot of great techniques that we'll cover in our upcoming podcast series on impact presentations. They include repetition, rhetorical questions, metaphors, and visualizing facts and figures. One thing that is not engaging is information overload. Don't overwhelm your audience. Use pictures and other visual aids to illustrate your points. If you're doing a PowerPoint, Don't put two informational slides right after each other. Mix it up. Give some information, then use a picture to help people understand what you're saying. Then give more information. Being engaging also means being interactive. Ask questions. Look at people. Ask for input. Get people to do something besides just listen to you talk. Lastly, you need to keep it real. If you start talking about things that nobody can understand, nobody can relate to, or nobody cares about, then you will lose your audience. Guaranteed. Try using an anecdote or story, a story that everyone can connect with, something that everyone experiences. Tell them why your topic matters. Tell them how it affects them, their jobs, and their lives. Connect yourself with the people and connect the people with the topic. Another part of keeping it real is working within your abilities. If you're not comfortable telling a joke in English, don't tell a joke. If you have to keep the words simple, keep them simple. Presentations are hard enough as it is. Don't try to push yourself too far outside your normal communication style. Right. Keep it short, simple, engaging, and real. If those words can describe your presentation, you'll do great. You don't need to use the word awesome. You can be awesome without it. That's all for today. If you'd like to test yourself on what we've just covered, have a look at the mybeonline.com website. There you'll find a quiz about today's show, as well as a complete transcript. Next week, we'll look at the actual delivery of the presentation. We'll talk about what you should be doing when you're in front of all those people. So long, and see you again soon.
You're listening to Business English Pod, the business English podcast for professionals on the move. Welcome back to Business English Pod. In today's episode, we'll be looking at closing down and summarizing your presentation. As we mentioned a while back, a strong introduction is very important to giving your audience a reason for listening. Similarly, a strong conclusion is very important to leave your audience with a great impression and give them a clear message about what action to take. So, what structure should you use to close down a presentation? Well, I'm sure some of you have your own methods, but this simple format has always worked for me and covers all the main points. First, give your audience a clear signal that you're going to finish. Second, briefly summarize the main points of your presentation. Third, state your recommendation or give your call to action. Let your audience know what you want them to do. And finally, finish off by thanking your listeners and inviting questions or discussion. In today's listening, we'll be exploring this format. The presentation takes place at Harper Toland, a major global producer of special-purpose steel. Last year, Harper Toland launched a new product line, ColorMax, which is a kind of brightly colored steel used in building and manufacturing. Unfortunately, the sales results in Europe for the first year have been quite disappointing. Nicholas Fisher, the new regional sales director for Harper Toland, has been hired to fix the problem. He is just finishing off a presentation in which he has been discussing his proposal. As you listen, pay attention to the language and structure Nick uses to give his presentation a strong finish.
Product and industry knowledge are important, but the crux of the matter is that we simply aren't aggressive enough in our approach to selling. To sell, you simply have to push, and push hard. So, as we can see, a first-class CRM strategy and a great marketing plan aren't worth the paper they're written on if we don't have qualified staff to push them through. Okay, that's all I have to say on this topic for the moment. Now, I'd like to recap the main points of my presentation before I open it up for questions. To sum up, first, I analyzed the sales results for 2006. I talked about how our drive to increase brand recognition through a surge in advertising has failed because of mediocre initiative and inconsistent follow-up from our salespeople. Second, I explained how our special task force found major deficiencies in our sales training system and in our staff's basic sales skills. Finally, I proposed a recovery plan for 2007. I stressed that the most important thing at this stage is not advertising or technology, but the way that we train our salespeople. Let me leave you with one thought. What I'd like to stress is, and I can't emphasize this enough, that it is absolutely essential to have an effective sales team, and effective salespeople must have effective training. So, what I'm asking from you today is a commitment to increase the training budget by 25% so that we can address this training shortfall. Then, by this time next year, instead of scratching our heads, we'll be cracking the champagne. Many thanks for your attention. And now, I'm very interested in hearing your comments.
When the dialogue begins, Nick is summarizing the main points in the last section of his presentation. As we said in BEP 102, it's vital that you have an easily recognizable structure throughout your presentation. Maintaining a clear structure helps keep your audience focused and interested. So, at the end of each section, you should usually summarize your main point and signal that you're moving on to a new section. How does Nick summarize his last main point?
So, as we can see, a first-class CRM strategy and a great marketing plan are not worth the paper they're written on if we don't have qualified staff to push them through.
So, as we can see, is our signal that a summary is about to begin. The single word "so" is often used to introduce a summary or to change the topic. What is Nick's main point in this section? Unless we have qualified staff to push them through, that is, to make them work, a CRM or customer relationship management system and a marketing plan have no value. That is, they are not worth the paper they're written on. Then, Nick signals that the last part of his presentation is over.
Okay, that's all I have to say on this topic for the moment.
He could also say,
Right. That ends the last section of my talk.
That's all I want to say for now on the third part of my presentation.
having clearly indicated that the last section of his talk is over, Nick signals a summary of his main points.
Now, I'd like to recap the main points of my presentation before I open it up for questions.
Recap is short for recapitulate, which means to summarize briefly. There's a lot more language that Nick could have used to introduce his summary. For example,
To conclude,
In conclusion,
now, to sum up,
so let me summarize what I've said.
finally, may I remind you of some of the main points we've considered.
During my talk today, I've described the results of our investigation.
during his summary, Nick uses sequencing words, first, second, finally. These are used to give a clear and concise summary of his main points. Also, notice the use of strong collocations. Collocation means word partnerships, words that naturally go together. Nick's collocations include analyze the sales results, find major deficiencies, and propose a recovery plan. Using such word partnerships makes your English dynamic and fluent. So when you're learning vocabulary, be sure to study words in groups or whole phrases. So, Nick has finished his summary, but his presentation is not finished yet. Actually, one of the most important parts of his presentation is yet to come. As you know, the last thing you say is probably what your audience will remember best. This is called the take-home message, the idea that the audience will take home with them. It's important to be decisive and clear. Also, try not to be too complex. The conclusion should consist of a simple major statement with no more than 2 or 3 connotations, if these are absolutely essential. A connotation is an association. This is also where you should give recommendations or make a call to action. Your audience wants to know what to do next. Don't forget to tell them. How does Nick finish up his talk? Let's listen again.
Let me leave you with one thought. What I'd like to stress is, and I can't emphasize this enough, that it is absolutely essential to have an effective sales team. And effective salespeople must have effective training. Now, what I'm asking from you today is a commitment to increase the training budget by 25%.
Nick shows that he's making his final comments by saying, "Let me leave you with one thought." Then, throughout his next few sentences, he uses a number of rhetorical techniques to add emphasis to his main point. Rhetorical techniques are ways to persuade your audience. He says, "What I'd like to stress is," and "I can't emphasize this enough." Notice how he lowers his voice and slows down. Longer pauses and a stronger voice add additional emphasis to his final message, which is a clear call to action. He says, "Now, what I'm asking from you today is a commitment." This is a particularly strong call to action. There are many other ways, however, to make a concluding recommendation. Let's listen to some more examples of phrases we can use.
In conclusion, my recommendations are:
I therefore propose the following strategy.
I'd like to finish with some observations based on what I've said.
There are 2 conclusions to be made from this, namely,
I think we have to.
I think we have seen that we should.
What we need to do is.
So, let me get straight to the point. We need action, and we need it now.
Returning to our listening, it's worth noting that Nick ends with a positive visual image for the future that they'll have by following his plan.
Then, by this time next year, instead of scratching our heads, we'll be cracking the champagne.
So, instead of scratching our heads in confusion, we will be cracking, that means opening, the champagne to celebrate. Finally, how do you end the presentation? You should close your talk by thanking your audience and by opening the question and answer session. This is also known as Q&A.
Many thanks for your attention. So now, I'm very interested in hearing your comments.
You can hear the smile in Nick's voice, can't you? Don't forget to leave your audience with a great impression by finishing off with a smile. There is, of course, plenty of other language Nick could have used to finish off his presentation. Let's listen to a few more examples.
Thank you for your attention. And now, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you for listening. Now, I'd be glad to try and answer any questions.
I thank you all for being such an attentive audience. And now I'm sure you must have some questions, so I'll be happy to try and answer them. Yes, Simon.
So, let's throw it open to questions.
Any questions?
Now it's your turn to practice making a concluding recommendation and opening it up for questions. Imagine that you've just given a presentation on improving sales. Think of 2 recommendations you have using your own company as an example. Do you want to retrain the sales department? Or perhaps increase the advertising budget by 25%? Do you want to expand your market? Or perhaps target a different market, such as older people or younger people, bigger or smaller companies? After you hear the beep, practice giving your concluding recommendation. Remember to make a clear call to action. Use the language we practiced earlier, such as, "We need action and we need it now." Or, "In conclusion, my recommendations are," or, "What we need to do is." Then, remember to thank everyone for their attention and open it up to questions using the phrases we just learned. Are you ready? First, take a few seconds to think, then begin talking after the beep. How did you do? Let's listen to an example answer.
So let me get straight to the point. We need action and we need it now. What we need to do is this. First, increase the advertising budget by 25%. Second, target a new market, mid and small size companies. Thank you for listening. Now, I'd be glad to try and answer any questions.
Remember, going back and trying it again is a great way to practice. Substitute different language. Use your pause button if necessary. Practice several times using different examples until you feel comfortable with a wide variety of phrases. Well, that's about all for today's Business English Pod episode on closing down and summarizing. Today, you've learned language for finishing off the last part of your talk, summarizing, making a call to action, and opening up the Q&A session. Remember, it's important not just to summarize your talk, but also to leave your audience with a key message and a call to action. You're listening to Business English Pod, the Business English podcast for professionals on the move. Today, we're going to take another look at making presentations in English with the first in a 2-part series focused on question and answer, popularly referred to as Q&A. This listening takes place during a meeting of senior sales and marketing staff at Harper Toland, a global producer of special purpose steel. As we begin, Nick Fisher, the European sales director, is just finishing his presentation. Let's listen. Pay attention to how Nick and Nick's boss, Max, handle questions from Brian, the European marketing director, and Cindy, the regional sales manager for Germany.
Many thanks for your attention. So now, I'm very interested in hearing your comments.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sure we all agree that it's an interesting proposal.
Thank you.
Now, going back to what you were saying about our product lacking a clear value proposition. You're saying that our salespeople are not successfully differentiating our product from the competitors.
Yes, that's right. They're not communicating to the customer the experience of using ColorMax. Not just facts and figures, but what makes ColorMax different in terms the customer can relate to.
Then why would you say that our market surveys are ranking us 30% ahead of the competition in the key values that we are promoting?
That's a fair question, Brian. I know your team has worked very hard on the launch, and I've studied the latest survey results. But the proof is in the pudding. We have to ask ourselves, why aren't we selling more steel?
So you just don't lend any credence to the survey?
That's not what I'm saying.
With such positive results, has it occurred to you that it might be just a little bit too early to make such a sweeping indictment of our training?
Look, Brian, I didn't say the survey's not important, but all of us can read the numbers differently. It's a little like painting with figures sometimes. But the facts on the ground tell a different story. Why isn't our order volume going up?
Nonsense. I think you have to take into consideration the fact that we have a lag time.
Nick, Brian, hold your horses. I can see we're butting heads a little bit, and it's not productive. Let's use the time we have left to sound out Nick's proposal.
Can I come in here?
Go ahead, Cindy.
If we retrain all the salespeople,
Sorry, hold on a sec, Cindy. Perhaps that wasn't totally clear.
oh,
In the first phase, I'm just proposing we retrain the project engineers and key account managers, not the whole sales force. Just the people with the greatest customer contact.
all right, but it's still a lot of people.
Right, I can see what you're getting at. However, I expect that with proper implementation, we can get the job done in a month.
But how do we measure success?
You mean, how can we tell if it's working?
Yes, that's right.
That's a good question. I would expect to see a 5% increase in order volume 3 months after the rollout.
Let's go through the dialogue piece by piece to analyze how Nick and Nick's boss, Max, deal with questions. Of course, often the presenter is also the chairperson of the Q&A session. In this case, Nick and Max are sharing this duty, so we can learn from both of them. First of all, how does Nick open the Q&A session?
Many thanks for your attention. So now, I'm very interested in hearing your comments.
Of course, there are other phrases to open a Q&A session, and you can check BEP 33 for more examples. But let's get back to the Q&A. What's the first question Nick's asked? Brian, the European Marketing Director, is skeptical about Nick's proposal, but he's careful to start out gently by offering some polite praise. This is always a good idea, as it shows respect for the presenter.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sure we all agree that it's an interesting proposal.
Thank you.
Now, going back to what you were saying about our product lacking a clear value proposition.
Uh-huh.
What does Brian mean by value proposition? In marketing, a value proposition is how one intends to differentiate one's product from the offerings of competitors. Do you remember how Brian begins his question? He says, "Now, going back to what you were saying, this is a useful way to refer to an earlier point." Nick himself could use this way to bring up something he'd mentioned earlier simply by changing you to I. For example, going back to what I was saying about establishing a clear value proposition, there are more ways to refer to earlier points. Listen.
What exactly did you mean when you were talking about market forces?
I was interested in your comments about timing. Could you say a little more about that?
Could I just go back to the point you made about branding? Well, in my experience...
So, Brian has just referred back to the earlier point about establishing a clear value proposition. What happens next?
You're saying that our salespeople